The Long Drive, Part 1. The ride begins. It was a quiet evening when Jack, a long-distance truck driver, started his journey. The sun had just set, and the sky was painted with colors of orange and purple. Jack loved the peace of driving at night. It was calm and lonely, just the way he liked it. His truck rumbled steadily along the empty highway, the only sound being the hum of the engine. As he drove through the dark, he spotted a figure by the side of the road, a young man, standing still with a backpack. Jack wasn't sure if he should stop, but he saw no cars for miles. Maybe the boy was in need of help. Jack slowed the truck and pulled over to the shoulder of the road. The young man hurried up to the truck, his face tired but thankful. "Thanks for stopping," he said, his voice a little shaky. "I've been walking for hours. Can I get a ride?" Jack hesitated for a moment. It wasn't always safe to pick up strangers, but the boy looked harmless enough. Plus, he had a friendly smile. Jack nodded and unlocked the passenger door. The boy climbed in, dropping his backpack on the floor. "Where are you headed?" Jack asked, looking at the road ahead. "Anywhere but here," the boy answered quickly, his eyes darting out the window. "This highway is, well, it's not like the others." Jack raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean? It's just a highway." The boy shrugged. "I don't know. People say strange things about this road. Weird accidents. People disappear without a trace. Some say the highway has a history. A bad one." Jack chuckled, trying to make light of the situation. "Well, I'm sure it's just stories. People love to tell tales about highways and old roads. They always think something bad happened." The boy was quiet for a moment, staring out the window. Jack could see that he wasn't convinced. After a long silence, the boy spoke again. "I don't know if you believe in ghosts or spirits, but this road is something else. It's like it has a life of its own. And it remembers the things that happen to people here, especially the ones who didn't make it." Jack looked over at the boy, not sure if he was serious, but the boy's eyes were wide, and his hands were clenched tightly on his lap. "Listen," the boy continued, his voice soft and slow. "They say that if you stop at certain places, you'll meet people from the past. They're not alive, not anymore, but they're still out there, waiting for something." Jack didn't know how to respond. He laughed again, trying to break the tension. All right. So, are we gonna run into a ghost in the next rest stop?" The boy didn't laugh. He just shook his head slowly. "You'll see. It's just a matter of time. The more you drive, the more you'll feel it. This highway has stories to tell, Jack." Jack wasn't sure what to make of the boy's words. He seemed sincere, but it all sounded so strange. Still, he didn't want to be rude, so he just nodded and focused on the road ahead. The boy leaned back in his seat, closing his eyes. For a while, it was quiet, just the sound of the truck tires on the road. But as they passed a small, dimly lit rest stop, the boy suddenly sat up straight. "We're here," he said, his voice tense. "This is where it starts." Jack glanced at the rest stop. It was small, with a few parked cars and an old vending machine. There was no one around except for a man sitting on a bench, staring at the ground. "You want me to stop?" Jack asked, unsure of what the boy meant. "Just stop for a minute. I'll show you." Jack pulled into the rest stop and parked by the bench. The boy got out of the truck without saying another word. He walked slowly toward the man on the bench, who hadn't moved. Jack watched, unsure of what was happening. The boy reached the man and stood in front of him. The man didn't look up, didn't say a word. The boy looked back at Jack and gave a small wave. Jack shook his head, confused, but stayed in the truck. Then, something strange happened. The man on the bench stood up. He wasn't old. He looked like he was in his 30s, but his face was pale, almost gray. He didn't look at the boy, but walked past him without a word. The boy didn't follow him. Instead, he stood still and watched the man walk into the night. Jack was about to call out to the boy when he noticed something even stranger. The man on the bench, who was supposed to be sitting there, had never been there at all. Jack's heart skipped a beat. The bench was empty now. The boy returned to the truck, his face serious. "Did you see it?" he asked quietly. Jack nodded slowly, trying to make sense of what just happened. "Who was that guy?" Jack asked. "He was one of them," the boy said. "Someone who died on this road, but not like the others. He never left. He's just here waiting." Jack didn't know what to say. The night suddenly felt much colder, the silence much heavier, but he didn't want to show fear. Not yet. He started the truck again and drove away from the rest stop, but the feeling that something was wrong stayed with him. As they continued down the highway, the boy sat back, watching the dark road ahead. "This is just the beginning," the boy whispered. "There's more to come." And Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to learn something about this highway he would never forget. Part 2. The first story. The road stretched on in front of them, dark and empty. Jack kept his hands firmly on the wheel, but the feeling of unease from the rest stop still lingered. The boy, who hadn't spoken much since the strange incident, finally broke the silence. "Have you ever wondered why some places feel different?" he asked. "Like they hold something, like they remember." Jack wasn't sure how to answer. He had always thought of roads as just roads, paths to get from one place to another. But now, after what happened at the rest stop, he was starting to question everything. The boy turned his head toward him, his eyes wide. "It's not just the road, you know? It's the people who were here. Their stories. Their deaths. They don't really leave. They just stay." Jack looked at him, unsure. "What do you mean by stay? You mean ghosts?" The boy nodded slowly. "Yeah, ghosts. But not the way you think. These aren't the kind of ghosts that float around moaning and scaring people. These are the ones who were in accidents, but they never really died. They stay trapped in the same place, living their story over and over again." Jack thought about what the boy said. It was hard to understand, But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that something strange was going on. Maybe there was something to what the boy said. As they drove deeper into the night, Jack's headlights barely cut through the darkness. The highway seemed endless, like it went on forever. Jack wasn't sure how much longer he could take this eerie feeling. The boy was quiet again, staring out the window at the empty road. Then, after a long while, he spoke. "I should tell you a story about this highway, a story about what happened to me." Jack didn't know if he was ready for more of the strange tales the boy had mentioned, but something in the boy's voice made him want to listen. He slowed the truck down a little, as if he was preparing himself for what was to come. The boy cleared his throat and began. "It started a long time ago. A lot of people didn't know it, but there was a woman who used to drive this road every day. She was a nurse like you, helping people. She worked late shifts, driving home in the middle of the night. She didn't think much about the highway. It was just a road. But one night, something changed." The boy paused, his eyes darkened, as if he was seeing the story unfold in front of him. Jack stayed quiet, wanting to hear more. She was driving home, just like any other night, when something happened. The weather suddenly changed. The sky grew dark, and the wind picked up. It was like the air itself turned cold. She couldn't see very well, so she pulled over to the side of the road. And then she saw it. Jack leaned in, feeling a sudden chill creep up his neck. The boy continued. "A car, a black car, came out of nowhere. It was speeding, like it was out of control. It didn't slow down, didn't try to stop. The woman could see the headlights coming straight at her. She tried to move, but it was too late. The car crashed into hers. Jack felt his heart race. Wait, did she die?" The boy nodded grimly. "Yes. She died that night. But that's not the end of the story. The thing is, the woman's car, it wasn't just any car. It was a ghost car. And the woman, she wasn't just any woman. She became part of the story of this highway." Jack swallowed hard, trying to understand what the boy was saying. The woman died, yes, but her spirit never left. She's still out there, on this road. And she's not the only one. There are many others. People who didn't make it. But they never really left. They stay here, on this road, telling their stories, waiting for something. I don't know what. The boy stopped speaking, and the truck fell silent again. Jack's mind was racing, trying to make sense of everything. A woman's spirit, trapped on the highway. A ghost car. It was too much to take in all at once. Are you telling me that the woman is still here? On this highway? Jack asked slowly, his voice unsure. The boy nodded. Yes. And she's not the only one. There are others too. But we'll get to that. It's a long story. And you're going to meet more of them. Soon, Jack's hands gripped the wheel tighter. He was beginning to feel like he wasn't just driving down a normal road anymore. It was starting to feel like a place where things were not as they seemed. The boy looked at him, his expression serious. This highway, it doesn't forget. And it doesn't forgive. Suddenly, Jack saw headlights in his rearview mirror. A car was approaching fast. It was strange, though. There was no other car around for miles, and this one seemed to appear out of nowhere. The car sped past them, too quickly to get a good look at it. Jack's stomach tightened, and he glanced at the boy. "Did you see that?" Jack asked. The boy didn't answer right away. His face was pale, and his eyes were wide, as if he had seen something terrifying. You saw it too?" the boy asked, his voice shaky. Jack nodded, unsure of what he had just witnessed. "That car," the boy whispered. "It wasn't a real car. It was one of them. A ghost car." Jack's mind was spinning. "Are you telling me that car wasn't real?" The boy nodded slowly. "Yes, it wasn't real. Just like the woman. Just like all of them. And now, they're following us." Jack's heart raced. He wasn't sure what was real anymore. He wasn't even sure if he should be afraid or just keep driving. But the boy was right. Something was wrong with this highway. He could feel it now, deep in his bones. As the truck rolled forward into the night, Jack could hear the boy's voice again, barely a whisper. "Get ready, Jack. The story's just beginning." Part 3. The next stop. The road stretched endlessly in front of them. The night had grown darker, the headlights of the truck cutting through the thick blackness. Jack tried to focus on the road, but his mind was still racing from everything the boy had told him. Ghost cars. Spirits trapped on this highway. It felt like a nightmare, but somehow, Jack couldn't wake up from it. The boy was silent again, staring out the window, his eyes distant and lost in thought. Jack wasn't sure if he should speak. What could he say? He was still trying to understand everything, trying to make sense of the strange things that had happened. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that nothing made sense at all. Jack glanced at the boy. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. The boy turned his head and gave a small, tired smile. "I'm fine," he said. But Jack could see the fear in his eyes. Fear that seemed to be growing stronger as the miles passed. Suddenly, the truck hit a bump. Jack's hands jerked on the wheel, and the truck swerved slightly before he regained control. He glanced at the road. There was nothing in front of him, just the long stretch of highway. The boy looked up sharply. "Did you feel that?" Jack nodded. "Yeah, I felt it too." "What was that?" The boy's eyes narrowed. "I think it's one of them. They try to mess with your head, you know. The spirits, they want you to feel lost. To feel like you're not in control." Jack shivered. It was hard to believe, but at this point, he was starting to wonder if there was some truth to the boy's words. The whole road felt strange, like something was watching them, waiting for them to slip up. A few miles later, they passed another rest stop. This one was even smaller than the last. There were only a couple of trucks parked, and the lights flickered as if they were about to go out. The boy sat up straight, his eyes fixed on the rest stop. "This is it," the boy said softly. "We have to stop here." Jack looked at him, unsure. "Why? What's so special about this place?" The boy didn't answer at first. He just stared at the dark rest stop. Then, slowly, he spoke again. "This is where it all began. For me, at least. This is the first place I saw the ghosts. The first place I felt their presence." Jack's heart skipped a beat. He didn't want to stop. He didn't want to face whatever it was that the boy was talking about. But the road was long, and they needed to rest. He pulled over into the rest stop, the tires crunching on the gravel as he parked the truck. As soon as the engine stopped, the boy got out of the truck without a word. Jack followed him, but his legs felt heavy, like they didn't want to move. The air around them felt colder, even though it wasn't that cold outside. The flickering lights above them seemed to make everything look darker. "Stay close," the boy whispered, his voice tense. "We're not alone." Jack stayed close, his eyes scanning the area. The rest stop was almost empty, except for a few people standing near the vending machines, their faces shadowed. They didn't seem to be looking at anything in particular, just standing there, staring into the dark. Jack felt a strange feeling, like the world around him wasn't quite real. The boy walked toward one of the old wooden benches, his steps slow and careful. He sat down on the edge of the bench and looked up at the sky. Jack joined him, sitting a few feet away. They both sat in silence, staring at the dim lights of the rest stop. "You're going to see them soon," the boy said quietly. "The others—" Jack didn't know what to say. He wasn't sure if he wanted to see anything else. But then, something happened. From the corner of his eye, Jack saw a shadow move across the parking lot. At first, he thought it was just a car driving by. But then he realized it wasn't. It was a person, walking slowly, as if they were floating above the ground. Jack's breath caught in his throat. The boy turned his head, following Jack's gaze. "Here they come," he whispered. Jack stood up, his heart racing. The figure walked closer, its movements slow and deliberate. It was a woman. Her clothes were torn, and her face was pale, almost gray. She didn't look at them. She didn't even seem to notice them. She just kept walking, as if she was on a journey she had taken 1,000 times before. Jack couldn't move. His feet felt like they were stuck to the ground. The woman walked past them without a word. Her eyes were fixed straight ahead, her face empty, as if she wasn't really there. The boy stood up next to Jack. "She's one of them," he said quietly. "Another spirit. Another ghost from the highway." Jack could feel his heart beating faster. "Who was she?" he asked, his voice shaky. "She was a trucker," the boy said. "Just like you. She was driving this highway late one night when she got into an accident. But she never left. Her spirit got stuck here, walking the road forever." Jack looked at the woman as she walked farther into the dark, her form fading into the night. He wanted to ask more questions, but he didn't know what to say. Everything felt too strange, too unreal. Just then, another figure appeared in the distance. This one was a man, wearing a dirty jacket and a cap. He walked in the opposite direction of the woman, his head down, his steps heavy. Like the woman, he didn't seem to notice Jack or the boy. He just kept walking, his face as blank as the woman's. "There's another one," the boy said. "A man who was in a crash a long time ago. He's still here too, trapped on this road. And there are more." Jack could feel the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He wanted to run, but he couldn't move. The figures walked by, disappearing into the darkness. The boy turned to Jack. "They're all here. They've all died, but they haven't gone anywhere. This highway is their home now. And they'll be here forever." Jack took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing heart. "How do we get out of here? How do we leave this place?" The boy shook his head. "You can't leave. Not yet. Not until the highway lets you go." The cold feeling in the air grew stronger. Jack's mind was spinning. He wanted to get back in the truck and drive away, but something told him that the story was far from over. The road stretched ahead, full of spirits and stories, and Jack couldn't escape it now. The boy looked at Jack, his eyes full of warning. "You've seen them now, but there are more stories to tell, more things to see. And the road, it never forgets." Part 4. The night is far from over. The night was getting darker, and the air was thick with silence. The lights from the rest stop flickered on and off, casting strange shadows across the parking lot. Jack felt like he was in a different world. The road, the truck, the boy, none of it felt real anymore. Everything seemed strange, like it was all happening in a dream, and Jack couldn't wake up. The boy stood still, his eyes fixed on the parking lot. His face was serious, even scared. Jack wanted to say something, to ask what was going to happen next, but he couldn't find the words. His mouth felt dry, and his heart was beating too fast. He just watched as more strange things started to happen. Out of the corner of his eye, Jack saw another figure walking slowly towards them. This time it was a man. He looked like a trucker too, just like Jack. The man wore an old jacket and a red cap. His boots made soft noises on the gravel, but there was no sound coming from his mouth. No voice. Nothing. He was just walking. Jack couldn't take his eyes off the man. He was moving so slowly, his steps heavy and slow, like he didn't have anywhere to go. The boy next to Jack took a deep breath and whispered, "He's one of them." Jack swallowed hard, feeling his stomach twist. "What do you mean?" he asked. His voice didn't sound like his own. It was shaky, afraid. The boy looked at Jack with wide eyes. "He's dead. Like the others. He's been walking this road for years." Jack stepped back. "What happened to him?" he asked, not sure if he really wanted to know. The boy didn't answer right away. He just stared at the man as he kept walking. Jack watched too. The man was getting closer, but he didn't seem to see them. His eyes were looking straight ahead, but they were empty, like he wasn't really there. Jack felt cold all of a sudden. It was like the temperature had dropped in an instant. The man passed them without a word, and just as he reached the edge of the lot, he stopped. He didn't turn around. He just stood there, staring into the darkness, waiting for something or someone that wasn't there. Jack's heart was pounding in his chest. "What is he waiting for?" he asked, almost whispering. The boy shook his head slowly. "He's waiting to be noticed, to be seen. That's all they want. To be remembered. But nobody sees them. Not anymore." The man stood there for a while, and then, without a sound, he faded away into the night, disappearing as if he had never been there. Jack felt a chill pass over him. The air was still, but it felt heavy now, like something was going to happen. Something terrible. Just as Jack was about to ask the boy more questions, another truck pulled into the lot. The headlights cut through the darkness, and the sound of the engine filled the quiet night. Jack turned to look. It was a large old truck, the kind you only saw on long trips like this. It wasn't anything special, just an old, beat-up truck, but there was something strange about it. The truck stopped near them, and the door creaked open. A man stepped out, but this man didn't look normal. His face was pale, too pale. His clothes were dirty and torn, like he had been traveling for days without stopping. But what really caught Jack's attention was the look in the man's eyes. They were empty, cold, like he didn't know who he was anymore. The boy next to Jack stiffened. "Another one," he whispered. "Another lost soul." Jack turned to him, his voice trembling. "What do you mean? Who is he?" The boy stared at the man, who was now standing at the back of his truck. "He was driving on this road just like us, but he never made it. He crashed. His truck flipped over, and he died right there on the highway. But he can't leave. He's stuck here just like the others." Jack felt his breath catch in his throat. But if he's dead, why is he still here? Why hasn't he gone to wherever people go when they die? The boy looked at Jack with sad eyes. "Because this highway, it doesn't let you go. Not unless it's ready. It keeps you here. It keeps you walking." The man with the empty eyes started walking toward them, his steps slow and heavy. Jack wanted to run, to get back in the truck and drive away, but his feet felt stuck. He couldn't move. It was like his body didn't belong to him anymore. The man walked closer, his face getting clearer in the dim light. Jack could see now that his hands were covered in dirt and blood. He had the look of someone who had been through something horrible, something he could never forget. When the man reached them, he stopped. He didn't speak, but Jack could see the pain in his eyes. The boy next to Jack whispered again. "They're all like this. They can't remember how they died. They just know they're stuck." The man turned away and walked back to his truck. his feet dragging on the gravel as if he couldn't lift them. Jack watched him go, feeling the coldness in his bones. The boy turned to Jack. "We need to go. We can't stay here much longer." Jack nodded. He wasn't sure what was worse, staying here with all the lost souls, or driving back out on the road where he didn't know what might happen. But before he could say anything, the sound of a car engine interrupted his thoughts. Another vehicle had arrived. This time the car was small and old. It looked out of place here. The headlights were too bright for such an old car. It pulled up slowly, its engine coughing and sputtering. Jack was sure it wasn't another trucker. This car was different. The boy's eyes widened. "No, not this one." Jack watched as the car came to a stop near them. The door opened, and a woman stepped out. She looked like she had been crying. Her face was red, her eyes swollen from tears. She looked around nervously, then saw Jack and the boy. "Are you okay?" Jack asked, stepping toward her. The woman didn't answer. She just stared at them, her hands shaking. I don't know what happened," she said in a voice that was barely a whisper. "I don't know how I ended up here." The boy stepped forward. "You're lost, just like the rest of us. You've ended up on this road, and now you're stuck. You'll never leave until it's time." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "But I don't understand. I was just driving. I was on my way home. I don't remember anything." Jack felt a deep sadness for her, for all of them. He wanted to help, but he didn't know how. He felt helpless, like he was part of a story that was never meant to end. The woman turned slowly, her face pale and empty. She started to walk away from them, her steps slow and deliberate, just like the others, just like the man before her. Jack watched her disappear into the darkness, her figure fading like smoke, and once again, the night was still, too still. Jack turned to the boy, his heart heavy with the knowledge that he had seen something he would never forget. The boy looked at him with sad eyes. "We're all part of this now. We can't leave." "Not yet." Jack didn't know what to say. He just nodded, knowing that whatever happened next, he was trapped in the same strange, cold place as the others. Part 5. The Road That Never Ends. The truck's engine hummed steadily beneath Jack, but it didn't sound the same anymore. The road seemed endless, stretching far into the night, with no signs of a town or any other cars. It was just Jack, the boy, and the strange people who had joined them. All of them were trapped like pieces in a puzzle that didn't make sense. And there was no way out. The boy was sitting quietly beside him, his eyes gazing out the window, watching the dark road with a kind of sadness that Jack couldn't understand. Jack glanced at the boy and then back at the road. The truck's headlights barely made a dent in the thick darkness ahead. It felt like they were driving into something much bigger, something Jack couldn't see, but he could feel it. It was like the road was alive, and it was pulling them into its grip. Jack couldn't stop thinking about all the people they had seen so far. The man with the empty eyes, the crying woman, the trucker who never made it off the road. He wanted to ask the boy more questions, but each time he tried, the words caught in his throat. The boy had said they were stuck. But why? What kept them all here, walking, driving, but never leaving? The truck rattled as it crossed over a bump in the road, but Jack didn't notice. His mind was too focused on the idea of being trapped, of not knowing what was real anymore. The boy spoke, his voice breaking through Jack's thoughts. "It's all a lie," the boy said quietly, almost to himself. "The road, the people, they tell you it's real, but it's not. This road never ends. And the people you see, they aren't alive. They've been lost for a long time, just like us." Jack didn't know how to respond. He couldn't even find the words. He looked at the boy, hoping for some kind of explanation. The boy turned his head and looked at Jack, his eyes filled with something Jack couldn't quite place. Fear? Hope? It was hard to say. "We're stuck here, Jack," the boy continued. "This highway, it traps people. It makes them think they can leave, that they can escape, but they can't. It's a cycle that never stops. You drive and you pick up others and they're just like you, they don't know how they got here and they don't know how to leave. We're all stuck on this road, just waiting for the end." Jack felt his stomach tighten. But why us?" he asked. "Why are we here? What's the point of this?" The boy shook his head. "I don't know. Maybe no one knows. Maybe it's just the way the road works. Maybe it takes people who aren't looking closely enough. People who aren't paying attention." Jack looked out the window, seeing the empty stretch of highway ahead. He felt like he could almost see the end, but it was always just out of reach, like the road itself was moving, pulling them forward while keeping them in place. "We have to keep going," the boy said, breaking the silence. "If we stop, we'll be just like them. We'll never leave." Jack nodded, not sure what else to say. He wasn't sure if he could trust the boy, but he had no choice. The road didn't give him a choice. It was a place without answers, a place where nothing was clear. The truck rumbled forward, and as they passed another rest stop, Jack saw a familiar face in the distance. It was the man who had been walking earlier. But now he was sitting by the side of the road, his head hanging low, as if he was waiting for someone. The boy noticed too, and his face grew pale. "That's him," the boy whispered, "the one who died here." Jack squinted to see better, and sure enough, the man was still there. He didn't look up when they passed, but Jack knew the truth. The man was a part of this place, a part of the road that never let anyone go. They drove for what felt like hours, but there was still no end in sight. The sky above was dark, with only a few stars scattered across it. The truck's headlights illuminated the empty road ahead, but it was as if they were driving in circles. The road didn't change. The trees, the signs, the rest stops, they all looked the same. The same nothingness stretched out before them. At the next rest stop, they stopped again, this time because the truck was low on gas. Jack pulled in, his mind racing with questions, his body too tired to keep going. He needed rest, but he didn't feel safe. Not here. The boy didn't say anything as they parked near the gas pump. He just sat there, staring out the window, his face distant and lost. Jack grabbed the keys and stepped out of the truck. He needed to stretch his legs, to feel like he was doing something, anything. The night was cool, but it didn't feel refreshing. It felt empty. The air was thick with something Jack couldn't describe. It made him feel like he wasn't alone, even when he was. As he walked to the gas station, Jack couldn't help but notice something strange. There were more cars at the pumps now, cars that hadn't been there before. But they weren't normal cars. They were old, rusty vehicles parked crookedly, their engines off, but no one was getting out. He walked closer, feeling a strange unease in his stomach. He couldn't explain it, but the cars looked like they had been sitting there for a long time, maybe even years. The tires were flat, the windows cracked, and the doors were open, but no one was inside. Jack reached the gas pump and looked around. The rest stop was eerily quiet. There were no other people, no workers, nothing. He looked back at the truck, but the boy wasn't in sight. Jack's heart began to race again. Where had he gone? Just then, he heard a noise behind him. He spun around, but no one was there. The silence was deafening. He took a step back, and as he did, he felt something cold brush against his arm. Jack froze. It was the man with the empty eyes. He had appeared out of nowhere, standing right beside him, so close that Jack could feel the coldness of his body. The man didn't say anything. He just stared at Jack with those empty, hollow eyes. Jack took a deep breath and took a step back. What do you want?" he asked, his voice shaky. The man slowly raised his hand and pointed down the road. Jack turned to follow his finger and saw something that made his heart stop. In the distance, the headlights of another truck appeared. But this wasn't just any truck. This one was different. It was huge, its lights blinding in the darkness, and it was speeding toward them. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he realized what was happening. The road was changing again, and this time, there was no turning back. Part 6. The final stop. Jack stood frozen, his eyes locked on the giant truck speeding toward him. The headlights were bright, too bright, like they were going to swallow him whole. The truck was getting closer and closer, and Jack's mind was racing. He wanted to run, but his legs wouldn't move. It felt like the ground beneath him was holding him in place, making it impossible to escape. The man with the empty eyes stood still beside him, not moving, not speaking. His hand was still pointed down the road, and Jack's gaze followed his finger. As the truck grew nearer, the sound of its engine grew louder, deafening, as if it would drown out everything else. Just as the truck was about to reach them, it suddenly swerved off the road. It didn't crash, didn't flip over. It just disappeared, like it had never been there at all. The lights blinked out, and the sound of the engine faded into nothing. The road was quiet again. Jack blinked, unsure of what had just happened. He turned to the man beside him, but the man was gone. In fact, everything around him had changed. The rest stop was no longer quiet and empty. It was now full of people. People who looked just like the ones he had met earlier. The same people who had joined them on the truck, people from the past, people from the road. They were standing around, watching him, their faces blank, their eyes empty. They were all stuck here, just like him. Jack's heart raced in his chest. He felt a deep, sinking feeling in his stomach. This was it. This was the end of the road. The boy appeared beside him, his face serious. "It's all over," he said quietly. "We can't escape. No one can. We're all part of this road now." Jack wanted to ask what he meant, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he looked around at the people, their faces familiar but different, like they had been here forever. He felt a strange sense of understanding come over him, as if he had known them all his life, even though they were strangers. "We're stuck," the boy said again, his voice softer now. "We've been here for so long, Jack, and we'll stay here forever. The road doesn't let anyone go. Once you're on it, there's no way off." Jack wanted to argue, to tell the boy that it couldn't be true, but deep down, he knew the truth. The road had already taken him. It had already taken all of them. And now, there was no way to escape. He turned and looked at the other people. They weren't moving. They weren't talking. They were just waiting. Waiting for something, but Jack didn't know what. "Do you remember when you first got on this road?" the boy asked, his voice suddenly full of sadness. "Do you remember how it felt? How it seemed like just another trip, just another drive. But it wasn't. It never was." Jack tried to remember. He tried to think about the moment he first got on this road. But it felt so long ago, like it was part of someone else's life. He couldn't remember. All he knew now was that the road was all that mattered. "It doesn't matter anymore," the boy continued. "We're all lost. We always have been." Jack's heart sank. There was nothing left to do. There was nowhere left to go. The road had taken him, just like it had taken everyone else. And now, they were all part of it, a part of something that never ended. He looked up at the sky. It was dark, but there was something different about it now. The stars were all out, but they weren't twinkling like they used to. They were just there, cold and distant, like they didn't care about him anymore, like they had forgotten him. Jack turned back to the boy. "Are we really stuck here?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The boy nodded. "Yes. There's no way out. This is our place now." Jack looked around again, feeling a deep sadness. The road had taken him, and now it had taken everything. There was no escape, no way back. This was where he belonged now with the others on this endless road in this endless cycle. But then, just as Jack was starting to accept it, something strange happened. One of the people, a woman he hadn't seen before, stepped forward. She was looking at him with a strange expression on her face. She didn't have the empty eyes that the others had. Instead, her eyes were wide and full of fear, like she had just realized something terrible. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, this isn't right. This isn't how it's supposed to be." The boy turned to her, his face hardening. "What are you talking about?" The woman stepped closer to Jack, grabbing his arm. "It's not over. It doesn't have to be. We can still escape. We can still fight." Jack felt a spark of hope flicker inside him. Could it be true? Could they actually leave this place? The boy frowned and took a step back. "Don't listen to her. She's just trying to make you believe in something that isn't real." But Jack wasn't sure anymore. Maybe the boy was wrong. Maybe the road didn't have to be endless. Maybe there was a way out. The woman's grip tightened on his arm. "We have to go. Now. While there's still time." Jack looked at her, then back at the boy, who was shaking his head in disbelief. He could feel the weight of the decision hanging in the air. Was it really possible to escape? Was there a way off this endless road? For the first time since he had gotten on the road, Jack felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance. Maybe he could break the cycle. But before he could make up his mind, something shifted. The ground beneath them trembled. The sky darkened, and the wind howled. Jack looked up, and for the first time, he saw something in the distance. A bright light, far away but growing closer. The road was shifting again, but this time, it felt different. It felt like something was coming to an end. Something big. But whether it was the end of the road or the beginning of something else, Jack couldn't say. All he knew was that, for the first time in a long time, he felt like he might have a choice. That's the end of the story. If you enjoyed the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more exciting tales. Check out our other videos and share your thoughts in the comments. Stay tuned for the next adventure. Thanks for watching.